Now we've got a government who doesn't know how to solve the issue of borders, not with the Navy, not with the Army, not with policy, doesn't know how to deal with the issue of housing or the economy or a whole range of other issues we face. But instead, their solution, they tell us, is to get us all on a digital ID.
Do you think we're going to end up looking like China?
It's up to us. Shelley said, we are the many, they are the few, right? It's up to us. We make this world every day. We go out, we go to work, we have families. It's our country, right? But if we give that up to people who decide that we're going to go down a road that makes us look like China or North Korea, that's up to us as well. If we, the people, decide we're going to do something in Britain, we do it. And there's no one that can stop us.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Getting There, the podcast, where we dig deep into the real conversations that actually matter, the ones that are shaping our future. So today we're diving into something that most people still aren't talking about enough: digital ID. What does it actually mean for us in the UK? How close are we to having one? What would it look like if every aspect of our lives, our health, our banking, our travel, and our spending was tied to one big single identity system? Is it progress or is it control? To help us break this down, I'm joined today by Alan Miller from Together Declaration, a movement that is campaigning to protect our freedoms, our privacy, and our individual rights that are here in Britain. Alan and I will unpack what digital ID really means for the ordinary people of the UK. How could it change the fabric of our society? And most importantly, whether it will open the door to something far bigger and far more dangerous than we could realise. Today, we are also asking the hard questions. Could a national digital ID ever actually truly work? What would happen, or when it happens, that the data leaks get out? And are we, without even realising it, drifting towards a world that looks more like China than Britain? Alan also shares what Together Declaration are now fighting for, and why your vote, your awareness, and your voice has never been more important. This isn't about conspiracy, guys. This is about clarity. And if you care about your freedom, your privacy, or what the next decade in Britain could look like, this is the episode you need to hear. Let's get into it. Hi, Alan, and welcome to Getting There, the podcast. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me here.
You look well. Very stressed, I imagine.
It's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
I've done something with this podcast that I don't normally do. I'm not ready. I'm ready, but I'm not ready, because what I feel like, I represent probably the average Brit in terms of knowledge about what's going on in the world. I dip my toe in the news. I wouldn't say like I'm super political, but I have a kind of awareness of what's going on.
Yeah.
So my hope is that today I will just represent the average Brit in asking you these questions about what on earth is going on in the UK landscape, and what does it mean for the ordinary people of the UK whilst these bills are being passed without us agreeing to them. So first things first, the main reason I wanted you here, digital ID. What is happening?
What's happening is that something that's been pushed by Tony Blair for a long time for it to be a solution to every problem, but that was turned down in 2010, is now being put on steroids by this current government. So this government did not have in their manifesto they would have digital ID, but now they're saying it's going to be a solution to stop the boats, or to stop crime, or to stop fraud. And the one thing about what you've just said is that I actually think the British public are ahead of everyone on this, right? They're very clear about what they want. They want borders protected. They want to be clear about, they want crime dealt with. They don't want the state constantly intervening in their lives, in their privacy, but they do want things being done in a decent British way, right? Which means that people can get on with their lives, they can make money, but they're not going to get burgled or attacked. But they're not constantly being surveyed or censored or having people nudging them or pushing them and that type of thing. And the big concern about this centralised state digital ID, they're saying that what it's going to mean is this: you won't be able to work without it. So effectively it's mandatory unless you've retired. So you won't be able to work without it, even though we've already got passports, we've already got driving licenses and national insurance numbers. then there are many concerns with it, right? So you say, well, what's so bad about it? Well, you got it. Sometimes we use our apps for things, and we do. But this is a state having access to all of your information and data and monitoring you. And we've seen that lots of things have happened, right, Brogan? We've seen things like, on the one hand, there's already been a lot of concern around things like debanking. So not just Nigel Farage, but lots of campaign groups and individuals were debanked. That means they were taken out of their bank because of political views or things they'd said.
Has that been since Labour have come in or before that?
That was before. So that was under both governments. But that's a concern under all governments, right? So that happened, and we had a big pushback. So we all wrote to the Financial Control Authority and the Bank of England. We've got at togetherdeclaration.org, we've got hundreds of thousands of signatories and supporters and members, and we, along with other people like the Free Speech Union and others, we campaigned to say this is unacceptable. If you can't bank, it's like those spy movies, right? You can't actually participate in society. Well, the whole thing about debanking is that whilst that was pushed back against, when you've got a centralised digital ID, and if the government decides they don't like what you're saying or doing, or how much you're eating, or what you're eating, or where you're going on a holiday, or how many times, and all of this might sound dramatic, but we'll look at each of these questions in turn. It's very easy for them to use that to basically shut you down. You can then not have access to things. You see the problem with all these, the issue with digital ID and all these things centralized, right, is that they might not necessarily do all these things all at once, but we should look at what they have done already. But they might not do all these things at once, but the potential for these harms are there. Now, censorship is another big concern, and surveillance. Now, you say, well, what? We're not living in Soviet Union. We're not living in Iran. During lockdowns, we had spy units sent on to everyone. So basically, there was something called the Rapid Response Unit and the Counter Disinformation Unit.
Now, what were they?
Yeah, so one was the Cabinet had, and one was the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, madly. And what they were looking at what people was posting online. People were getting shadow banned, censored, and had files and cases on them. Citizen journalists, doctors, journalists in the mainstream media, people who said things that had questions like about masks or lockdowns or the mandatory jabs or any of those sorts of things. And that all came out in the lockdown files and in the Twitter files. The Telegraph did the lockdown files with others, and really brilliant. And the Twitter files, what came out subsequently after Elon Musk bought what was Twitter and is now X. We've now got the Counter Disinformation Unit back. But it seems that it's very partisan. People have heard about two-tier things, and this is about digital ID concern as well, right? Two-tier. But what we saw was that some people who said some things about lockdowns or about masks or about mandatory jabs or about the environment, so Sadiq Khan will call them deniers, or about now more broadly questions around borders or migrant hotels or issues that are like that, where there's where some things are acceptable, saying some things are not. Now, if you've got a centralized digital ID system, and we've already seen that Facebook and Meta and Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg said, well, we did switch things down, we did shadow back, we did censor on instruction of the Biden government, and on. You're like, okay, and they've already got relationships with secret services because this is really how things are done now, using tech in a big way. So already there's a relationship there. Already we've been told these things have happened. So now we've got a government who doesn't know how to solve the issue of borders, not with the Navy, not with the Army, not with policy, doesn't know how to deal with the issue of housing or the economy or a whole range of other issues we face. But instead, their solution, they tell us, is to get us all on a digital ID. A digital ID, right, which then can do all sorts of things, track where you're going, see what you're buying, see what you're saying. We've got facial recognition technology that no one agreed to. No one has put in a manifesto that's being rolled out by police forces in London and across the UK now as we speak. And that is all part of this infrastructure. And, it's very sneaky, right, bro? Because what they do is they say, well, we want to protect children. Now, who can argue with that? No one's going to say, well, I don't want to protect children.
Yeah,
right?
No one is.
But then what they say is, so protect children, we have the Online Safety Act, and then what we'll do is we'll have to prove that children aren't getting online. So you'll all have to use your biometric data to get online. So effectively, everybody gets treated as though we're children or as though we're paedophiles or terrorists. in order to get online and have our biometrics. And you see, this digital ID will be a biometric digital ID, right, where all your data and everything's there. And they're using examples like in Estonia and in India and New South Wales and elsewhere as saying, look, this is really good. And we can talk about those examples. But one of the massive concerns alongside our privacy and the fact that the state shouldn't, and in Britain there's a precedent in English law that a policeman asked someone a long time ago, what you do? They said, none of your business, because unless you think someone's actually committing a crime, it is no one's business. And we've got a proud tradition in Britain, right, where freedom and privacy and our rights and conscience, all from the Reformation and the Enlightenment and the setting up of Parliament, all subsequently to the World Wars, we fought to defend these things. And now they're being just imposed on us without any discussion. They said, well, we're just doing it. I know nearly 3 million people signed a petition, but we're just doing it. We haven't said we're going to do it in the manifesto. We're just going to do it to you. And, you know, the other big concern is data breaches, right? We've seen hundreds of millions of them with the big tech companies, and they're the best at doing the tech. We've got a one login system with the government, which is the system that has consistent data breaches. We just saw Marks and Spencer's with lots of data breaches. We saw Heathrow was grounded because of data issues. We know that in Afghanis and our own service personnel and spies for Britain, right? You know, MI6 and others, they had their data breached. And if they can't protect service personnel, they really think they're going to protect ordinary, everyday people. So there's a myriad of concerns with this. And at togetherdeclaration.org, we've always made the point that democracy should be about the public. What, you know, you're saying everyday people, us, we, right, being able to look at things, think about them, scrutinise them, think about if they're acceptable or not, consult, and then we go along with them if we think it's good. If you think, well, there's more benefits than there are costs, great, we'll do it. But we haven't had any of that discussion and debate, and now they're trying to put it on directors. So 8 million directors. By the middle of November, anyone who wants to set up a company at Companies House, you have to use digital ID.
By this November?
Yeah. And then within a year, every single director in Britain's meant to be on it. Now, we're pushing back against that. We're saying, no, we're not doing it. You don't have to do it. The thing about these weak authoritarians, right? They say all this stuff, but we've been down this road before, right, with them. And I say them because Labour's in, but before it was the Conservatives. But we had a fight against them with digital ID, with vaccine passports. And we pushed back against that. We got, you know, and we pushed back, and they said it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do. You're going to have a vaccine passport to get into a club and a bar and a place, and you're going to have a mandatory jab, and you've got to have it. 45,000 care workers lost their jobs, didn't take it, but they said these NHS staff got to have it. But we all fought together, and lots of people came out proudly in Britain, and we stopped it. And that's what we're going to do with this. And it's really important that your viewers, and I love that you said that at the start, that your viewers and people that listen and look at this show get involved in this, right? Because we're all about everyday people. That's why we're called together.
A couple of questions here. You said we've had this argument with them before.
Yeah.
And when you say them, do you mean like, because that would have been deemed a right wing, left wing, right wing, is it all the same bird to you, whoever's in government? Do you think they all have the same kind of motives to roll out this system? And why was Tony Blair not successful in 2010?
Good question. So each one. I think that, look, ever since we've had like the Constitution in America and freedom of speech, there's been some people who believe in wanting everyone to have it, and there's been some people who want to limit it and restrict it and say you can't really let people have it. In the same way, we've got a House of Lords because they thought we'll have the commoners with a common vote, but we'll have some people who are not elected just in case the mob get a bit unruly. And I always think there's that tension. There's been that tension in free society in Britain and elsewhere, and but the good thing has been that for the most part, judgment and the ability of thinking people can make their minds up and have their view has swayed. Certainly been in the earlier part of my life in Britain and what people experience. In the more recent period, the idea that the technocrats is what I call them, and they've been Conservative and Labour and Lib Dem. They're all very similar. They're not like the old days of what Labour was and what the Conservatives were. They share a lot of ideas. They go to similar places. Now, similar universities, similar courses. You see them, they're professional. They've been, up until recently, professional MPs and have been separate from the public. They haven't really been engaged. Now, what's happened, right, through a number of things, Brexit, lockdowns and other things, is that the public have become have reasserted itself is kind of and everything's changing, right? So new political parties are emerging, people are getting involved in politics that have never done before. So a lot of new things are happening, and that's exciting, and we'd encourage that. But I do, when I say they, we've been down here before. Yes, I say they because Boris Johnson, who said he'd eat his own ID card if he had to have one, was the person who said on Freedom Day, we're going to have Freedom Day. By the way, we're going to have vaccine passports. So you got a guy who quotes, he's very bright, he quotes lots of the classics, and he likes to quote, Herodotus and Cicero. But there he is denying the very fundamental principle of privacy and freedom, right? You can read as much.
But how much power does he actually have? For me, he's a puppet.
It doesn't matter what anyone says in Davos or what all these individuals are. If we, the people, decide we're going to do something in Britain, we do it. And there's no one that can stop us. So it's a bit like these conversations. I do have these, and I'm sure there are lots of malign interests and people who are trying to do things, and there's people who make a lot of money out of things, so they lobby. So Larry Ellison has got an interest in this with the Tony Blair Institute, a lot of money, for instance, pumped into it, and there's money to be made from digital ID. But there's always money to be made from everything, net zero. In fact, any area anyone goes into, there's money. The question is, who's, your point, who's pulling strings, who's doing things? There are obviously globalists that go to places like Davos and they all agree about things, but it's not like it doesn't matter whether you think it's conjured up there or here. Our technocrats, our globalists have shared a view for a long time. But when we in Britain, the public, ordinary people say, this ain't happening here, then they're not really in a position to implement things. So that's exactly what happened, right, during lockdown, because our friends in Canada and Australia looked and they said, there's no way you're going to stop this mandate, but good luck, right? And what happened is we did manage to do it. Now, look, we don't win everything.
Did you manage to do it? Or did the world get bored of COVID and went on to the next thing?
Well, it's a good way to
look at... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
It was like on to the next thing. There was another war somewhere.
Yeah.
Russia started invading Ukraine. And then everyone's like people, it became a way of life, COVID. Oh, you got COVID, it's the flu. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And they sacked 45,000 care workers.
Were they allowed to be reinstated after?
Well, in theory, potentially, we said that we wanted an apology and then them to be brought back in and paid for the time they missed. But many didn't go back in there, right? And then there were still things going on about people wearing masks and all that subsequently for quite a long time. But the point is that we lost 45,000 care workers. Now, 100,000 NHS staff were threatened. And up until the bone, they were saying they're going to go or they have to have this. Now, these are people who worked for a year and they'd been there and they decided they didn't want or need the jab or whatever they decided, right? That's centuries of freedom to make your own informed choice. And it's very difficult to make an informed choice when you're being lied to or not told the truth about lots of things, right?
But also, interestingly, they were probably making an informed choice because they were working inside the hospitals and seeing that no one's really fucking dying. And the people that were sick were largely overweight, had underlying medical issues. And they were probably like, what's the odds of me getting here? I've been here a year. Yeah. I've not really caught it. Or if I have, it's something like the sniffles or the flu. And I've lived. So why would I put this foreign poison into my body?
Well, they may well say that, right? And lots of other things. So, and so what happened was, look, there is definitely the case that no government would really want to sack 100,000 people. People should not be naive about that, right? Yeah, of course they didn't. But the point is there was a fight and they would have definitely had vaccine passports and COVID passes for everyone on apps if no one had fought back. Right, so we took 360,000 signatures to Downing Street. We lobbied. We didn't. It's not just about petitions.
Yeah.
We lobbied MPs and councillors, NHS trusts, universities. We have people up and down the country, locally in streets, ambassadors. Where we went to campuses, we talked to both students and deans of universities, to the boards there at NHS trusts, and we basically ran a campaign and we had people out and we said this is unacceptable. Going on the press, eventually more mainstream. To begin with, it wasn't. To the point we got those frontline workers on Good Morning Britain and BBC Breakfast and talking about their stories and what. Now, all that wasn't there before, right? And that story wasn't being told. And the thing is, when we look back, we can say, well, it would have just happened anyway. But you could say that about everything and never do anything, right? You say, well, this, you definitely would have done this show anyway, but you know what you've had to do this, right? It's looking back on it and saying it was inevitable. It takes out human agency and what we do on things. Well, women would have always got the vote. Well, would they if the suffragettes hadn't fought for it? Who knows, right? Maybe. Would it have been 50 years later on? So there's always that thing. And also, what else would have come down the line?
But I guess my question onto that was, did they kind of loosen their pull with the COVID, knowing something like this is coming down the line? Because one of the things that I found interesting is that Keir Starmer has been speaking about immigration, whereas before that he was like, anyone that spoke about immigration or illegal immigration is just a racist.
Yeah.
So have they used immigration and highlighted it themselves in order to weaponise immigration for us all to go, who doesn't want this to be safe?
You're exactly right. That's exactly what they've done, right? So this government, under pressure from Reform and others, and the public and all sorts of other people, right? There are other new people, But the discussion of migrants, illegal migrants in particular, and hotels, but also migration generally, and culture and concerns around integration, all that. This government has then gone, right, this is a way to deal with it. And look, let's be honest, it's a smart way for them to try and advocate something, but everyone's ridiculed it. We know that in Italy, France and Germany, they have national ID schemes, and they have lots of illegal migrants. They have lots of boats. I mean, Italy, Lampedusa, it's just remarkable how many come through there, and they've had that issue. And so it hasn't stopped it, and we know it doesn't stop it, and we know the arguments are out there that it doesn't stop it. So they've now switched now. The arguments they're now making is it's for health, right? So the NHS Digital. NHS Digital, it's going to be really good because if you're in the Hebrides and you can't get something, you can get it online, and if you can't get a GP appointment, it all sounds really good, right? So how could you disagree with that, right? It just speeds it up, and we just move it all along. But you see, the problem is it doesn't drill down on the real things, right? Why is there an issue with seeing a GP? What's going on with resources? What's happening with the NHS? Why is there a huge bureaucracy and not enough efficiency of the frontline staff? How could we organise hospitals differently? Is also the amount of people and numbers and resources a question? What do they do in Europe compared to here? And what's our policy going to be on that? Instead, what they've got is a technocratic so-called solution again, digital ID. We monitor, censor, regulate, limit, suffocate with this. Or we just do, and we say that somehow it makes us feel better. We haven't got any policies on the actual things you want, not on energy independence, not on food independence, not on how we're going to actually deal with the borders. And so they want to call people names. They want to call the British public names. You racist, far right, gammon, white van man, the Emily Thornberry view of the world, that anyone who flies a flag, those types of people. And they've tried to embrace it a bit more now, knowing that's a problem for them, right? But what they've gone and done again, haven't they, at their Labour Party conference, they've gone and weaponised this whole idea that the British public's all racist. And you see what's so dangerous about all this? Whilst they do all this, and they try and present some people as extremists, like the Pink Ladies, like Tower Hamlets Council was done yesterday, and I was there at that.
Well, they labelled them...
Well, they're extremists. They're saying they want to select extremists and raise the colours extremists, the flags. Now, the thing about all this is, with digital ID as well, in the real world, they're already doing things like arresting comedian Graham Linehan for coming to the airport, like with 5 armed police officers. They arrest him, right, for 3 posts. Or we've seen all sorts of examples.
One of the guys at Epping, he just got 30 months for wrapping a flag around something outside of the building, whereas the guy who molested the child got 14 months, and he would only serve half that, wouldn't he?
The ones I know about, there are 3 guys who were involved in fighting, they've just been convicted, and what the charges were that they were involved in punching out or kicking out with the police there, and each of them has got more than that individual who's
molested a child.
That's right. So
make that make sense.
Make your own mind up with you will. And this is the concern that people have got, the 2-tier approach. So I was talking about free speech, but there's obviously the acts as well of people, right? And the British public is very concerned about violence, rape, burglaries, which are ignored. But yet 6 police can come around Bernie Spofford's house, or they can come to Alison Pearson's house and never quite tell you what it's for. Non-crime hate incidents, 1,300 arrests last year. 13,000 arrests last year.
13,000?
Yes. And you've got a situation where non-crime hate incidents, scores of them happening monthly, right? Regularly. And people are like, what? Because of what's said. Now, if you've got a digital ID system and you're monitoring all of the posts and what people say and what people do with this technology, then you just only have to look at what's already happening, right? What is already happening and what could happen with that. You've got a centralized system where you won't be able to access the internet, even get on the internet, maybe not go to certain shops. Maybe you've gone over your carbon footprint.
Okay, so I think this is a good idea to strip it back, right, and explain what would actually be on here.
Yeah.
And so from what I understand, it's a centralised system where they'll be able to see what we spend, where we go to work. What is it that they'll have access to?
So the main things to begin with is it's got all your information on there. So we've already got that with passports and everything, but what they'll have is your name, your address, date of birth, and all of that. Now, it's biometric as well, because this is the point about the NHS digital, and they want to get as much information as possible. So that could involve everything, right? DNA and all of your information, but certainly biometric. So when you go in and you can sign in, some people do it with some things, with some banks and everything. And the thing about some banks or some apps or some particular commercial relationships, that's a relationship between a commercial entity with some protections that if they break them, there are rules about them, and an individual and a customer.
So if there was a data leak on this, someone could potentially get into my banking. Is that
so
what you're telling me?
absolutely. But see, when at the moment, if you choose to do certain things, because people often say, yeah, but we've got all these things already. People have got certain relationships with commercial entities. When the state has access to all of this information, then that's very different. Now, you said a lot of things about the procedure, the jab, right? Now, people have said, and we know that the World Health Organization and others with the IHR, the International Health Regulations, they say, well, when the next pandemic comes, you go, hold on a minute, they're only really meant to come every 100 years. So you're saying the next one, we're getting ready for it now.
Yeah, they've put it through Woo, haven't they?
So the idea that you've then got this thing that if you don't go along with what people are saying you must do, whether it's a lockdown or whether it's procedures, and we saw all of the bureaucracy that happened, right? Come off a flight, get tested before you go on a flight, come off the flight, mask on the flight, get a jab as well. By the way, stand up, sit down, go, we don't really know what's going on. You're like, what are you talking about? Take the mask off to eat, but then put it back on again. Hello,
right,
what?
listen to this. This is no joke, yeah? But then this makes me want to Chinese burn people, yeah? I'm in the gym, yeah? Girl gets on the running machine. We're all next to each other on the running machine. Takes it off to run. Then when she goes to the weights bits, put it back on. Wears it in the shower, takes it off to shower, puts it back on. It's taking everything in my body, Alan, to not go bing. Like, how messed up and silly. Like, what? And also, like, I'm a really positive person, but I can't help but feel that there's a darker force at play here. Like, what would they have benefited from us acting like Muppets, but jabbing us and making us do all this silly rigmarole? What was the benefit?
Okay, so there's different things, right? So firstly, they didn't think that everyone would go along with a lockdown. So they thought there'd be more reaction and more response to it. But one of the things about when you tell everyone there's a medical thing going on, that people, it's tricky, right? Because even though trust is low with politicians, there's a sense in which I don't know, like you're saying these things about the medical situation and how dangerous it is. Obviously, after a little while, everyone began to see. Like, I was able to do some voluntary stuff, right? So I was giving out some food to kids with hospitality. And I'm like, but how am I able to do that and not... And then someone else... And then all these people were selling to Uber and to deliveries, right? And all that. And then, like, you're like, well, how comes that doesn't spread it, but this can spread? So the thing is, people quickly began to see that...
It didn't add up.
So those things happen, but I think that the idea that people are compliant and doing as they're told is something that technocrats want to see. And it is the case that if people will talk about the United Nations 2030 agenda, some areas of the WF, there have been discussions and views of getting people onto things like smart cities and all-round digital. And look, there are different reasons why different people want to do certain things. Some people are genuinely believe that the most efficient way to proceed and advance in society is to do certain things. Technology, I've got to say, there's loads of benefits of it. And I think they're really important. And I think we should harness them in particular areas where they're of benefit to us. Where we need to have protections is, for instance, at the moment, someone can't just come into your house, right? They have to have a warrant. They have to get permission. There's a set of procedures about what they have to say. Well, I think something's going on here with Alan or Brogan.
And prove it.
Yeah, and then they get a warrant to come to your house, right? Or at least have enough evidence to give whoever's issuing the warrant belief that this is valid and it's not just harassment or a whim. In the same way, to wiretap someone or to look at their mail, not many people have mail now, but you know what I mean? We need the same provisions in the technology arena, right? And you've got some things that go on GDPR and everything, but the issue with digital ID is we've already seen, right? Today, the Prime Minister is talking about in India how great the Aadhaar digital ID is. There's a 1.4 billion on it, right? Remarkable. ARDA is being criticised as leaking like a sieve, meaning that its data breaches are everywhere, that people have been selling data, there's been all sorts of discrimination, people have had their IDs mixed up and they haven't had some of the provisions and the benefits. It's a sort of myriad of concerns. But yeah, here we have the Prime Minister saying, well, this is great and they've got some really good things, we want to do what they're doing there. At each level, the idea that these technocrats, and I think the issue really, Brogan, is technocrats in our own country. And the truth is, it's a bit like a conversation about spiritual views, right? You're never necessarily going to really know, right? You could sit here and say, yes, there are. I say, no, they're not. What I know is what we do here and now, right? Which is, it doesn't matter if people are out there who are conniving to try and get us all this thing or that thing, right? I know that people have always had some views about what should happen to people, right? They don't think they should speak as much. They don't think they should make as many decisions. There are technocrats, though, that are right there in plain sight that are being elected that really are contemptuous of the public, and they say it to us all the time. And I think that our main antidote, whoever you think there's a problem is if for us to be strong as a public, for us to have grassroots, boots on the ground in every street, as you talk about, like where everyday people are, the great British public, right? The people who keep everything running and keep everything going, for us to have our friends, neighbours and colleagues have our muscles engaged with this situation, right? And I know for quite a long time, for 20, 30 years, people haven't been interested in politics, but actually the 100 years before that, it was the public that shaped everything. It was the public that decided. That the people in power had to respond to them. And we're in a position like that again now, where the British public is ahead of a lot of things. And together, what we're trying to do is really focus on a few key, really important points. Free speech, digital ID, key one, right? And like right now, if you're going to be a director or not, we've got a whole campaign that's going to be writing to everyone. It's doing it right now. We've got an open letter petition and going to Companies House, the Institute of Directors, the Small Business Federation, all the trade bodies, but the government, the Department for Trade, and to say, this, you don't need this. This is not necessary. And it's not going to be compulsory and we're not going to have it. Because if they could get all the directors to do that, they'll then get all the directors to get all their staff to do it. And the point is, we don't need it. And there's got to be an opt-out. It's essential people have to be able to opt out these things. Like, for instance, my mum can't go and do these internet banking things and apps and all that. And there are millions of people like that. But it's not just old people. There are other people of all ages.
Capable, yeah, of course.
Not capable. And people who just don't want to. We shouldn't have to. Like, we fought for a long time to have cash. And banks still open, right?
Yeah.
We did that with the Bank of England. We're going to keep... It's... The head of the Bank of International Settlements, a global institution that regulates the transaction between banks, said we want to get everyone on central bank digital currency because then it will mean we can track every single transaction and watch it all. And you think, yeah, I know that's what some people want to do. You're technocrats, right? You think, oh, well, if you just get it on a spreadsheet and you just see us all there and we're all walking data mining, you can like data mine us and you can say, well, this is them. There's a QR code. I know it's not Brogan and Allen anymore. These bits of data, and are they doing the right thing? Are they eating the right food? Are they going the right place? Have they got the right friends? Are they saying the right thing? And it all depends on who's asking those questions, right? And what their thoughts are. And we should never have the state be doing any of that.
This is a question I have. So do you remember when COVID happened? They're like, it's the law. You have to have a mandatory COVID pass. But am I right in saying this? It wasn't actually the law because laws take years and years to pass through Parliament. So they were saying it's a rule, but it's not actually a law. And could this be similar to what we're seeing with the digital ID stuff, or is it officially going to be a law?
Good question. So yeah, they made all sorts of announcements, and through nudging with a psychology unit and a behavioural psychology unit, and through all these assertions, they made these points. They weren't laws. And this won't be passed unless they decide, this government, and they would be off their rocker if they tried this. But if they've to make some emergency legislation and pass it, because even the people who put forward the proposal, Labour Together, they've called, interesting, they changed their name to that. They used to be called something different. But Labour Together, they've proposed the Brit card. And in there they say, look, it's going to be till about 2027 for you to get this kind of thing in place. Now, in order for it to be a law, as you say, it's got to go to Parliament, and then it's got to go through the House of Lords, and there'll be challenges. And frankly, who knows if this government will even be here in 2027. But these discussions are really important.
But it is really important because you're telling me as of next month I can't open a company.
Right. So what they're going to exactly. So it's not a law, but what will happen is, if you're really keen to open a company.
Yeah. Say I want to start something next month.
You'll get a thing through, and it will say, in order to do that, you've got to be registered digitally, blah blah blah, and it will sound just really. And particularly if you're young, and you want to do it, you're like, all right, it's another thing, right?
So it sounds really authoritative, this letter.
Yeah, and it's going to be like, this is what we're doing, and this. Now, there's a little wrinkle in it all, which is there is a provision that if you really can't do it, you don't have to do it, right? Because they've left themselves a little caveat. But our point is this: it absolutely is not mandatory. You don't need to do it, and particularly we're interested in directors who are already directors who are going to argue back and disagree with this. And we're getting a lot of people with trade organisations and directors of companies to have their voice heard. We'd encourage all of your viewers and listeners to sign this. It's at togetherdeclaration.org about directors, but to share it, right? And it shows stages of what you can do, as well as write to your MP, but it write to Companies House. We're going to be doing that with accountants and all the business departments in government, but with the media and everyone, and explain these steps and what this means. And in the same way with the NHS, and in the same way with what they're looking to do with children, and in the same way with what they're using to try and do with facial recognition. All of these are underpinned, you see. Once you got a digital ID, it was interesting a while ago in the discussion around low traffic neighbourhoods and the ultra low emission zone, ULEZ, right? And Sadiq Khan was like, well, the best way to really do it is to track the car. But obviously you can only really fully track it if you've got a digital ID, because then you can track everything: how many people in the car, what the kind of
How will it do that?
Well, because you'd all have each of
Oh,
these.
so it can see exactly where you're going.
Well, you'd be
like
able, yeah. Well, you can track it, or all of that can be done, right? So you could say, well, these amount of people are using this amount of footprint. You must have 3 in a car, not 1, and that. I mean, look, we've seen all sorts of things, haven't we? We've seen councils fining people for recycling in the wrong refuse bin. We've seen streets shut down and cameras put up and people not allowed to drive there because of dubious ideas around clean air, which don't exist. They've been made up, right? And they've done that all across the country, and they've gaslit lots of people, and they've fought with them, and the councils have used their resources against their constituents, the majority of whom have often said, we don't want it here. Some of them have been thrown out and taken out. But we've seen this happen, right, in lots of things. And these have been in pockets of fights that have gone on since the lockdowns, right, coming under emergency traffic orders. Lots of brave people fighting all around the country, right? We've worked with many of them. And what this is now is a fight. This is the key fight. This is the hill for everyone, right? It's because the fact is that the government doesn't need this. The people don't need this, right? It's not going to bring any benefits beyond. You could say, well, this is the thing. Do a cost benefit analysis. The concerns with the issues of privacy, our rights, our freedom, and the control of a state versus any benefit that might come, they're completely disproportionate.
So let's bring it back to that moment you were just saying. So I'm opening a company next month, so just anyone that's listening to this, like, what can I do? They get the letter in there. What do they need to be ticking? That they're incapable of doing it? Do they have to
I just
that?
say anyone who's about to start a company, say you're not going to do that and do it the old fashioned way, right? You can get in your information and make a big fuss and go back to them and say, look, here's my passport, here's my details. As it happens, that's got all the information you need. But the amount of new directors in the period, we will get everyone to do that as well, but is not as much as the 8 million or so directors that exist already.
Of course.
So we want to get those people particularly voicing, and we're going to create a crescendo like we did before with the government. But also there's May elections, local elections. In the last elections, we worked with farmers and others, all in rural constituencies and others, put pressure. And we get our people to come out and say, ask key questions on these issues. The digital ID is going to be a central issue for people to vote for or against a party. And we're going to let them know that they're going to be voted for or against on the basis of this. There's already divisions within the Labour Party, pretty much unanimity amongst all other people, right? Reform have said they dispense with any digital ID laws that have come in. Lots of other people have said that as well. And so, Labour's facing a crisis. If they face a crisis over their own internal issues with the benefits and others, but we're pushing hard on this. We're not going to stop, right? I mean, Britain, we can't allow Britain to come into a checkpoint country where everything's about proving your identity, your biometrics all the time under a surveillance state. Unacceptable. Not okay. We're not having it.
But why do you think they're so desperate to push this? Is it because there's a massive financial gain for them because data is the most important commodity, well, the most expensive commodity in the world?
I think money comes into it for sure, and there's relationships with tech, but there are people who think genuinely that this is a really efficient way to manage people. See, politics should be about presenting your arguments, winning the public to it democratically, and then implementing measures, right? That's what it should be. What it's become is behavioral psychology, nudge, fear, PR, manipulation, not having a relationship with the public for the most part, most of them, right? Being estranged, like little elite groups that think, Labour does not represent labouring people anymore, right? So they've kind of university type outlook, right, wokey outlook, and then they're contemptuous. They're like, all those races, they're great unwashed. It's like, you can't make it up. And so because of that, and because that has existed with the Conservative Party as well, there's a kind of contempt for people, and they would rather think of everyone as this amorphous blob that needs to be managed, and in a technocratic way, rather than living, everyday, breathing people that are actually the people that keep this country going.
Do you think we're going to end up looking like China?
It's up to us. The question always is, what's going to happen is up to us. Shelley said, we are the many, they are the few, right? It's up to us. We make this world every day. We go out, we go to work, we have families. It's our country, right? But if we give that up to people who decide that we're going to go down a road that makes us look like China or North Korea, that's up to us as well. So it's up to us to make a decision, right? What matters, what counts. In the same way you'd protect your house or your family, protect our country. Do not let... I sat in the garden with my mum, and it sounds mad, during lockdowns, and I'm like, no, I'm not having this, Mum. I can see where this is going, and I'm not prepared to let Britain... I'm very grateful to being born and growing up in Britain and have the things. I've travelled quite a lot, like many people, and I've had a look around the world and see... We are very fortunate still, right? There are lots of problems and we need to address them, but it's been a remarkable experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And I'm not prepared to sit by and let some people turn it into a authoritarian, draconian, tyrannical nightmare. No. So I don't think, but there's a risk that can happen. We already have people knocking at the door because people put social media posts out or say certain things. And, lots of people are being arrested for these things. It's unacceptable, and we need to turn it around. We need to turn it around in the civil service. We need to turn it around in our institutions. We need to turn it around with government. We need to get a proper shake-up and transform that. But one of the central ways to make sure that happens is to stop this digital ID, the forced digital ID, from happening.
And for people that have just listened to this, they're like, well, what's going on in China? How could that be bad for us? Do you want to just paint a little picture of what is going on in China?
Well, China's an authoritarian country, right? It's huge. There are, and what's happened is since they had their transformation, what they call the revolution, the CCP is in every part of their lives, and it means that the state has a very clear relationship with the citizen, and there are things you can and can't say, and things you can and can't do, and there's a social credit system digitally, right, which it means that you get certain credit for being a certain kind of citizen and doing things in a certain kind of way. And then you get deductions for not doing that. And then that will then deem certain things about what you can and can't do, where you can and can't go, and opportunities you can and can't have. Now, look, right, you could say that morally something like that might be, we could have a moral virtue.
Because doesn't it flash across when they cross the street and stuff?
Well, there's all sorts of things. So there's still now, with the whole thing that happened with COVID, there's areas that the alarms would go off if you have them on public transport, or where you could and couldn't go, or being let in certain places. So alarms would go off, lights would flash. There are a whole range of things that can happen. The main thing is it's a grading based on how you are following the rules or the way of what the diktat of the state or not, how good a citizen you are in that way. And look, I think that moral virtues are really important, right? And we could say as a society, we could say that we should have certain moral virtues, and we should all encourage them, right? And we should also have concepts maybe of saying that's disgraceful or shame and all of that. But they're things that we use our agency for, and we all decide and we make decisions about those things and say what's acceptable and what's not. Not that we've got a state and a kind of big brother type environment where they press a button or they shut us down because we're not doing what they think's right. And I just think the British public, right? Your show, you speak to, you started off by that, and I'm really refreshed by that. I think that the people, most ordinary people come into contact with every day of their lives, the people I spend a lot of time with, because we do events all around the country, we talk to people, we're always everywhere, like we go a lot of places. That's not the Britain that they want. Right, we don't want that. We want, and people are really clear about what they want. They don't want lots of people just coming into our country that no one knows anything about, particularly being put in local neighbourhoods and communities. And they want to have a situation where there's like services are run, that they have a decent economy, there's an opportunity to make money, not just have to take benefits. And they want some very basic, they want their kids to have a better opportunity than perhaps they did. And up until recently, that was seen as what was going to happen. What they don't want is an overbearing, interfering state that's deciding what you should and shouldn't think all the time, what you should and shouldn't say, where you should and shouldn't go, who you should speak to. That is not the British way.
I'm quite intrigued because did you say just under 3 million or 3 million people signed the petition to not have digital ID?
Yeah.
And the government's response was like, okay, but we're doing it anyway. Yeah. That makes people feel pretty powerless. Like, how can 3 million people say that and then that be the response? And what would you say to people who are feeling powerless around this?
Well, don't feel powerless because we have the power, but just a couple of things, right? So they got voted in by about 7.5 million people, not that many people, far less than ever before. And we know that some people who got, for instance, 4 million or slightly less only got a few seats. But all of that is changing. We've seen in the last local elections, right, something that we've never seen before. Scores, dozens of new councillors, right, for reform. And there are also Advance has got a new party. There are different things happening. We also know that Jeremy Corbyn's got a new party, right? I mean, there's a new landscape in the country that they said you'll never get anything changed. It's always a 2-party or 2.5-party, 3-party system. Well, that's all changing. That's all up for grabs, and people are saying very different things, right? It's also the case that there were 3 million people who said, like, oh, Keir Starmer should go on a petition. They said, well, look, we've been voted in, we're doing this, and we're not going anywhere, right? They have got a crisis internally themselves. They're panicking about this. We know this because we know people all around everywhere,
so
right?
What would it take to overturn them?
Firstly, we should all get involved in our open letter and petition. The reason I say it is not because 3 million people have done it. They said they're just going to do it. Firstly, they can say what they want. What they actually can do is something very different, right? So they're giving it the large one, well, we're just going to do it anyway. Well, what does that actually mean? As we've said, you've got to take that to Parliament. You've got to go through procedures. But also, we're going to keep putting pressure on and unite people and having their voices heard, because we're determined that people get to flex their muscles more and more, right? So saying we're not going to have that. Get involved in fighting back. We've got everything from in your local shop. You don't all have to be spokespeople, right? You can give out flyers in the street. You can, with your neighbours, you can have local meetings. You can put up posters in the cafes in your local areas. Up and down the country, we organise meetings. We can do all of those things. We do a series of things where we email and we call MPs and we phone them up and we go to their surgery, right? All those things we can do. And then there are elections in May, and the last elections had a big impact. And this election is going to have an even more an impact.
So this is electing for
local elections for councillors, so a third of them around the UK, of which London is a part of that this time. And lots of them lost seats, major seats last time. And now, not only that will probably have an impact on who the Prime Minister might well be after that.
So who should we be voting for if we're in London and we don't want digital ID?
Well, you should see who's saying that they don't want digital ID. Anyone who it stands up and says they don't want digital ID, you should vote for. At the moment, as a political party, the party that's saying that is Reform, who've got candidates in places. And there are some people in the Labour Party, as I said, and there are some Lib Dems and Conservatives that are saying that they don't want it as well. The issue is with the Conservatives, you can say what you want in opposition. Now, you could say this about Reform as well, but you could say what you want. But you were in power and you tried to bring these things in. I think that's unforgivable, and I don't think they should be given the benefit of the doubt because of that. That's my opinion. But we always encourage our supporters and our members and our signatories to ask key questions at elections, right? We have never gone out and say, just go and vote for it. One occasion we did in Oxford where someone was independent and they stood against low traffic neighbourhoods. But generally we say, these are the questions, because we've been a broad church with different people from different political backgrounds or none, right? So we're not like a party representative. Right, you only have to look at what we say and then look at what some of the other and you'll work out that there are some that say more what we say, right, on net zero, and issues like digital ID, on free speech. So we would just encourage everyone to ask whoever's standing and put it to them and see where they stand on digital ID. It's really important we do that, right? The more that people put it to people who are standing as local councillors and find out. But, you know, unequivocally, this is something that Reform has said that they're going to do.
And what would happen? Is there like an actual legality if, say, for example, the Conservatives got in and they've said in their new manifesto, we're not introducing it, and they get in power and they do it? Is there any repercussions for that, or is it
the repercussions are political, right? So it's a big thing. So like we've really had a really big response to the fact that we've shared Yvette Cooper, who's, you know, the Home Minister, who's the Secretary of State, who basically has said before, well, it's not in our manifesto, we're not going to do it, and then like they've gone and done it, right? So that people get very incensed and upset about that, because they know that you've got a time to put it in front of people and say this is what we stand for, but then you bring in, it's like what they did with the farmers, saying, promising all these things, and then they did a complete U-turn and they started attacking them and imposing the inheritance tax, and that's backfired as well, because we have done a lot of work with Farmers to Action. We just did a month-long trailer of truth where we had farm trailers going to different farms, county shows, live fairs, villages, and the public signing that and getting involved. We were at Diddley Squat Farm. Well done to Jeremy Clarkson and everyone. But we were up and down the country, Scotland, England and Wales, and it all culminated at Liverpool at the Labour Party conference, where we had a big rally about that. And the public are really behind our farmers. We want food security. We want decent food. We want it from our farmers. And we want not to have to do what we've done with energy and be dependent from things abroad and then prices skyrocketing. So we need a proper food policy, and we need to support them. But what's happened is that the farmers have stood up. We've seen that carers and others and drivers have stood up, and now the public stood up around digital ID. Don't be despondent. You can absolutely shape things. We've done this before, right? We have actually had an impact on this before, and now there's many more of us. We're much more organised. You can all be involved, and I'd encourage people to stand as well. But the main thing is that we see this off and get involved with together.
And when they put in the new laws for farmers, does that just go in with immediate effect? Are they already feeling the severity of that, or?
Yeah. So what happens is that when there's different procedures for when you try and pass legislation, but basically there's different bills. So a bill like the assisted suicide bill, right? It's a bill, and then if they vote on it, it becomes an act. But then it has to go through readings in the House of Lords as well, and back to Parliament. They play ping pong, right? It goes to House of Lords. They might review some things, change some things. It goes back to House of Parliament, back to the Commons. That goes back to the Lords. It goes ping pong back. And so they can't just, unless they do some emergency legislation piece, right? Which that would be a big challenge to them. I mean, that would be an all-out declaration of war on the British public, and I would strongly advise they never do that. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this. I'm going to be debating the guys who, I mentioned it. I'm going to debate them at the Battle of Ideas, which is I don't know when this is coming out, but it's going to be on the 19th of October. People should come along to it, right? Because they are the architects of this, and it's to their credit that they're going to come and debate publicly. It's in a public auditorium. The Battle of Ideas is great. It's at Church House in Westminster, and the Battle of Ideas has hundreds of speakers and thousands of participants, and Together has got a stand there, and we're doing a number of sessions. The other thing we're doing there is a session on the Saturday on farmers. So it's Saturday and Sunday at Church House in Westminster, but they are going to debate us, and we're going to thrash all this out, which I think is important. We've also got a big event November the 16th, which we have speakers. We've got some really exciting speakers, right? We've got Jay Bhattacharya, who is now the head of the NIH in America. Basically, Jay Bhattacharya did the Great Barrington Declaration with Sunetra Gupta and Martin Kulldorff, and basically he is someone that was branded a certain type of person for saying that lockdowns were a problem. They were not the right way to react. And now he's been brought in under the Trump government to run the head of health alongside and under Robert Kennedy Jr. So it's a remarkable thing that's happened. And this is the thing about how much things can change and how quickly they can change and what they talk about populism, but the public.
But do you think we have any characters as strong-willed and as outspoken as Trump here? Like, even Nigel Farage, like a lot of people who I know have had conversations, they're like, he still really doesn't have a backbone. Like, Trump is quite, what's the word you want to use? Unapologetic. But I don't think we've seen anyone like that in the UK, if ever. Perhaps Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, I think, and I'll carry on talking about the other speakers afterwards. But so, look, in America, Trump is Trump, but Trump saw what was going on with the public. The public, everything from what happened to people in the Appalachians to Pennsylvania to the Southwest and the southern states, and the way that the impacts of globalization and the blue collar workers and how they felt cheapened and disregarded, and they weren't the beneficiaries anymore of the American dream. He understood that. And we should remember, right? He wasn't the first person to talk about it. I mean, Obama, whether you love him or hate him, talked about the Beltway and being an outsider and not within it. They all crafted this. They understood that there was a sort of sense of a disconnect from the public and the mass of people to the elected representatives. What Trump's masterstroke has been to do, and he done it in Trump 2, because in Trump 1 he realised he had his hands tied and it infuriated him, and I think he really understood then what the state apparatus was about. And we've got the same problem here, which is that you think to your point, in a way, who's pulling the strings, but it's not that there's some shady thing behind. It's the people that are running the institutions. So the civil servants, you say, well, we're going to repatriate people, and the civil servants don't let you. You say, we've been voted in to do this thing, and they get in the way, right? DEI, ESG, all these commandments that they're kind of pursuing. And then you've got elected representatives, and they know are only there for a certain amount of time, and they long it out, or they just don't let you, right? So Trump understood this, and he's made loads of legislative changes when he got a massive mandate the second time. But you only have to look at what happened to Liz Truss to understand, in the same way, some other things, that we've got a situation where from the Bank of England and the civil servants and the state apparatus, that things they restrict people, right? So Trump had that happen to him. He's had lawfare attacks. And I think that genuinely, so his particular character traits, fine, they're good in the sense that, I'm not saying they're all great necessarily for an individual, but in this instance, they're brilliant because I think he's changed. Like, I've watched a lot. I lived in New York for a long time. I've kind of watched that whole thing. I had a business there and all that. And I've seen that. His preparedness to believe in himself, let's call it that, and keep going, and also seeing what has happened with the state, and fair play to him, right? Because he's like, they will shut this down and this needs to change. This is not democratic. But I think that came as an enormous shock to him. But he had that in the first incumbency, and now he's come out fighting. There are other things one could criticise about what's happened there, right? I certainly have got opinions about it, like on free speech and other things that are happening now. That's not to say that some of the really important comments that are made about Europe and free speech, they're exactly right? I stand with the vice president on that as well. So here's the question, right? Do we have a person like Trump? I don't think that's necessarily the thing. I think that there are individuals that are there, but the public, I want to keep saying this, right? The public, the great British public, it's like people, when they talk about history, they talk about great leaders all the time. Leaders are important. But it's the people that are out on the field, the battlefield. It's the people, the NCOs, the officers, the troops, right, the ground, and the British public. And I think, look, I'll give you an example. When we were doing all the things about low traffic neighbourhoods, and we're going around the country, in Leeds, in Bristol, in Bath, in Sheffield, everywhere, Birmingham, there are all these people that run like local businesses and local resident groups and all that, and they were up in arms, but they were really smart, they were really well informed, they loved their community, and they were articulate. And I'm like, you guys should be running, I don't know why you're not running the council. We've got loads of brilliant people. We've got loads of brilliant people who've got commitment. And I bet you, right, any of the people, you go down the road now and you put them out and you say, right, if these things that matter to you, people would fight tooth and nail for them, right? For their family, for their kids, for their house. And I think that what's happened for a while is the idea that it's not for me politics, or that's not. And that's changing. So you just got to look at how many people
And I think we've got lazy.
Okay.
So I went to the Stand Up to Racism March and the Tommy Robinson March and interviewed people.
Yeah.
And
well done.
Literally, probably maybe like 8 out of 10 people backstage at the Tommy Robinson thing that I was speaking to, who had like made donations, obviously took time out on a Saturday, didn't vote because they felt irrelevant. They felt like, or we couldn't be bothered. We're too lazy. I was so blown away by and I have to be honest, I never voted. I was like, oh no, none of it matters. It'll be fine. Wow. Like there were so many people there that were keen to give up their weekend and protest, but no one made it to a ballot box. It's mental.
So one of the it isn't, and that won't happen again.
No,
but that it isn't. But what it is that when people felt that perhaps there wasn't something that they genuinely were inspired by or represented them, or they weren't engaged. Look, a lot of people have changed and moved very fast, right? So. And this is the point about people being able to change, and it's really important because some people are very critical about if you haven't had the same view from like 7 or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if you haven't been saying the same thing somehow, I quite like the fact that people have changed and they learn on the go and they move, right? And it shows that they can respond
because
to
our
things.
landscape's moving.
Totally. And so voting's really important, and it's not the only thing, but voting is really important. And I guess my point is that it's not that we don't have someone like Trump. That for me, that's not the question. I think there are lots of people that and history forges people, right? And we become something bigger than we are in circumstances generally. If you look back, I mean, no, it's like having a kid or anything. It's like everyone, well, what do I do? And you rise to the occasion, right? And people do. And we've seen that in lots of situations through history, lots of people that we rise to the occasion. That's why I'd encourage many more people to get involved. I would just say that lots of people who've never been involved in politics, lots of them have stood, many of them are now councillors, right? And never been involved in politics in any political party before, right? And we'll see how that all plays out. But that's an inspiring thing. That's a good thing. And we need more of that. And I think that the thing about we were talking about speakers, the American moment has had an impact politically and culturally on the rest of the world as well. You were talking about Keir Starmer, wasn't it? In a way, he's now saying things that 9 months ago he'd be trying to get people locked up for, right? Almost. It's like the whole thing shifted so much. But other speakers that we've got there, we're going to have Alison Pearson, who is a journalist for The Telegraph, who's fantastic. People will know her.
So where can people go to have a little nose?
Together-declaration.org.
Right, okay, so we're going to send everyone there.
Yeah.
Now, like, I just feel like unless you're living under a rock, but you won't be living under a rock if you listen to us, there is just like a huge unrest in the UK. And there are so many people going like, oh, I don't think Labour will last that long. They're definitely not going to be voted in next time. What would it actually take to get Labour out? Like, what would ahead of the next election?
Well, I think them continuing to do what they're doing is, I think he should just crack right on, can carry on, because it was allegedly with the polls, digital ID's gone from 35% in favour to minus 14% since he's been advocating it and pushing it. So, Keir, you just keep cracking on. You keep talking about all the things you are. You keep like mugging us off if you think that's what you're doing about migration, about the economy, just about everything, really, right? His response to Southport, for instance, and calling people criminals before they were convicted, and saying the Home Office did that, and then him saying that I'll have people on remand before they were convicted, and yet his very different response to things like the Manchester attack, right? And what I mean is, very quickly they start talking about far right, neo-Nazis, racists, but they won't talk about radical Islamophobia, for instance.
Why?
I think that the why is because for a long time, particularly on the left, the idea has been that if you say some things, but that it's spread to everyone, if you say things and those about a group, and that group happens to have some people that happen to be brown or black, that you're being racist, right? But the thing about Islam, but radical Islam, is that it's not really about colour or anything else. It's about a particular outlook. And within that, though, we've got issues to discuss, right? Integration. And we've had this whole thing that you're not allowed to talk about things. That's why we saw the scandal of the rape gangs, the travesty of it. And that's why people want to say that you're far right, or fascist or racist. If you don't do what many other countries just take for normal, which is like say that you've got to have an actual legal procedure to come into the country in a normal way, and you have to police that and you have to manage it and protect your borders. And I think that it's become lazy. I think people don't want to talk about the virtues of the arguments. They don't want to have a discussion. They'll say, and people will get things mixed up. They'll say, is it you're against migration or immigration, right, versus
illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration. Now, some people might be against migration. They might say we've had too many migrants coming into this country, all colours and all people, and we should only have 50 for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
You could make that argument and discuss it out. But people have become shrill. People have now, because of identity politics, we start seeing ourselves as the issue. So when you disagree with someone, it's not a principle that we're fighting about. People start seeing it as an attack on them. And that's where the words are violence comes from, and the cancel culture and the travesty of what we've seen with Charlie Kirk, right? But not just Charlie Kirk, where people get attacked now because the people are like not used to talking. They think that if you discuss and argue, you got to be shouty. Then they want to start automatically, they put on masks and start fighting. And I just got a message to everyone, right? Calm down, yeah? Because we're all fellow citizens. If you do want to tear up, get in a boxing ring or join the military or go to a war zone. But we've got to calm down, because the thing is, when people start doing that, that's very dangerous, right? And that's not necessary. The thing, and this is what's really important, the ability to discuss our ideas out and clarify them are essential. And we mustn't be terrified or terrorized by anyone. And this is where I do think there's a connection between the technocrats and the elite in Britain for the last 3 decades who said there's nothing good about Britain, you've just raped and pillaged and we're disgusting and we're horrendous and everything's racist and nasty and we've got to decolonize history and the curriculum. And the radical Islamists who say you're all decadent and they were all white slags and you're just disgusting and we don't want... You can see why it is that has all come together, right? They all hate what's so brilliant about Britain. They hate what's so great about culture, about the values of the Enlightenment. And I think that that's really important to uphold those things against anyone who would shut them down. Now, I do want to make a point, because this can all get mixed up in the whole thing, right? I also believe in tolerance and religious freedom, part of the Enlightenment, right? And it's important that, because people sort of use things and they just slip into stuff, right? Like all migrants, or then it becomes about colour. And I'm really opposed to the idea that it's about colour. I was involved in anti-racist stuff, which really meant that 30 years ago, right? Different things than when I was younger growing up. But also, there are practicing Muslims and people that are Muslim that love life and they contribute and they pay taxes here in society and they're decent people. And I think that's really important that we understand that. But I also think there is an issue that's occurred that hasn't quite occurred in other communities, where on the fringes of that and around that, there's a whole thing that's going on, right? Particularly in some inner city areas around the UK, the Rochdales, the Rotherhams, Tower Hamlets, different areas, right? Leicester, where you've got this radical kind of, we've seen it in some of the mosques and the discussions that are going on there. So the fact that now this Prime Minister and this government is saying, we're going to have an Islamophobia rule or law, so you can't have these kind of conversations, shows how authoritarian they are and how terrified they are that we can do what we're saying, which is to have a proper open discussion about it and say, is this okay? And what should we do about it? And what's happened to the idea that you need to be integrated? We should be proud of it. I think about it, right? We've this great country with great history. There are problems here now, and there have been in the past. Make no doubt, right? We spent the whole show talking about them. But there's also remarkable, brilliant things, and that we need to defend and uphold. And the irony is our grandparents obviously all fought Nazis, real Nazis, and defended them. And now the British public's ahead of all this. So when those people in government and what they call the left, but I'm not into that whole left-right thing, it's like when they start shouting fascist, everyone's like, what? No, you protest an LTN or ULEZ, you're a far right and you're a fascist, which is what the BBC said. All this stuff is water off a duck's back. It is a bit dangerous sometimes, because when you're in an environment where someone starts shouting you're a racist and you might be in the middle of a certain community, right? It can just kick off, and that's bad and dangerous, and people should be sensible. But in the end, I think the thing is, we got to thrash all this out. And at Together, we're very keen on engaging with people. Like, you went and spoke to various people. It's great if people are prepared to speak, right?
They weren't.
Oh, right, okay.
Not a lot of them.
Yeah, that's
and
a
what
shame.
I found, it was really interesting, the stand up to racism thing, because nobody was of any colour. They were predominantly, people probably might not like me saying this, but this is from my experience going down there, white, middle-aged, angry men. who probably got bullied in school and was using this radical
Maybe that's who
community
Gary Neville was
to have
talking
a
about.
voice. It was very strange. I was like, okay, can you tell me how you've suffered with racism? They all had masks on. I said, can you explain why you've got a mask? They screamed in my face. And I was like, I'm just asking why you've got a mask if you're not doing anything wrong. Like, if anything, politically, you're on the right side. Do you know what I mean? Stand up to racism. You're ticking all the boxes. He's like, fucking Peter Thiel. And they were just so aggressive. Like, actually, my heart was going at one point. I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm going to get out of here.
Right.
But so obviously 50,000 people, 50,000 Christians in Nigeria have been killed by Boko Haram.
Yeah.
You don't see one piece of that in the news, which is far worse than what's gone on between Gaza and Israel and everything. They're butchered alive because of their religious beliefs. Now, people might go, oh, this is racist to say this or whatever. If we saw 50,000 Muslims or Jews that have been persecuted in that way, we would not hear the end of it. I mean, obviously we've still got the people that are being held up, which I think up until a few hours ago are gonna be let go. But I find it so interesting why Christians are so underrepresented.
Well, partly I think what's happened is when the elite, in their disgust and contempt for anything to do with history or tradition, as they've unhinged themselves from the public and for a sense of who we are, and identitarianism has become the new holy grail, victimhood and identitarianism, that what's happened is that everything that's perceived as being about tradition or culture is seen as doomed and problematic and wrong. And Christianity has been seen as part of the thing that is easy to dispense with or get rid of. And, I know Nietzsche said God is dead, but this has been a long time in coming. And various people like Scruton and others have talked about, even in the 1850s and 70s, only 50% still went to church. But the Britain is still formally a Christian nation, right? The Church of England and the history of that. But what's happened is it became very, very okay to put down Christianity, to make fun of it and all of that. Whereas the culture of victimhood and offence went on steroids. Now, it happened with Salman Rushdie and the Satanic Verses originally, and with people that were like burning those books and putting a death threat, a fatwa on Salman Rushdie in Britain. And we've seen that he had to go in hiding for a long time. And more recently, he was stabbed in the eye and attacked again. Terrible, right? For just writing. You were talking, I overheard you talking about I've got to write, right? For writing, for one of the great freedoms of being human, right? So he was attacked. And we've seen this whole culture of you're not allowed to offend me, a snowflake thing, that words are they're destructive and they kill us, and like words are violence. No, violence is violence. Words are not violence. And this kind of a multicultural outlet that you're not allowed to say things about some groups or some people, and that's racist. But it's all open bets on Britain and its history and attack on it. So that's all kind of melded together, right? And it has happened, and it's certainly true in Yemen and Sudan, in Syria, Nigeria, and elsewhere. All sorts of horrific things are happening, and the standard of what's going on and the discussion about Israel and Gaza, whatever your views are on all of that, it's just interesting that far less is spoken about all those other countries where in many of them far more people, even proportionally, are killed and die, and many of them are women and children, and yet the discussion hinges around this much more. And it's not to say that people can't be or shouldn't be interested in that. It's to say that it's just interesting that also people that are journalists and reporters and broadcasters are not doing that, right?
But is that because the powers that be who they work for are like, no, we're focusing on this?
I think that what we've seen in Britain in particular in the last few years is very, very concerning. If we look back, Ariana Grande concert, if we look at the 7/7 attacks, if we look at London Bridge attacks, if we look at Lee Rigby or attacks on other soldiers, the radical jihadi idea of offence and aggression and ultra-violence, that isn't interested in a particular nation or a campaign. Really what they want, and they've stated what they want, right, with ISIS and others, is a kind of caliphate, a world global order of a radical outlook, and this is what it is. And hate, freedom, nation states, democracy, rights and privacy. And we've just saw a similar thing happen in Manchester. And the form some of it has taken has been like anti-Semitism, I think it would be true to say. And also not talking about, look, we heard about the mosque that was attacked, the arson attack a few days ago, and that's terrible, and it should never happen. And 150 churches have had arson attacks in the last 5 to 6 years, and 3,300 or more. This was even up to about a year ago, so there's more criminal damage to our churches. But no one really says too much about it. Now, I'm not saying all of them are purposely political, but many of them are in a similar context. But we hear about the mosque one, and our Home Minister says all sorts of things about them, but not about the churches. And I think that the thing is that we also live in a world now where you're allowed to, it's seen as being virtuous, and people will talk about children dying, and as though it's, but they'll talk about, and they'll chant certain things, and you're allowed to wave the flags, right? So we see for the last year, like demonstrations, not just Palestinian flags, but like Hezbollah flags, ISIS flags, all sorts of flags on there, people doing real Nazi salutes on something. Not all of them, and I know people who've gone on those demos and they genuinely would like to see peace, right? Yeah. But there's an issue that's happened, right, which is that there's been a cultivation, it seems, of a deeply concerning mixture of things which end up being like, it's like anti-Semitic. It's not just you have a conversation about what the state of Israel is and Zion and its relationship to what was Gaza and the West Bank, and where are the national, because, you know, if you really get into all of this, and we're getting a bit deep now, but where are the anyway, so your quick question was, why is it okay? Because we could
and
go really.
Also,
why is it okay to have an open season on Christianity and others, and they don't talk about it? And I think it's a really important question.
And also, why is the government? By the way, I'm not expecting you to answer this. This is just things that are in my head. It's kind of expecting you to answer it. But why do you think the government is so frightened to acknowledge that there is radical Islam extremists living in London that want to do damage? That there is, and it's not saying it's everyone. There's extreme radicalists in every
over
group.
40,000.
But they're too scared to identify and acknowledge that, but too quick to label the average white working man, and that's what I can't understand.
Well, absolutely, it's a really important question. There's over 40,000 people on the security watch list of radical jihadis. I mean, the guy who did the Manchester attack was called Jihad, right? I mean, it's like
come on, mate.
Yeah, so the thing is that I think there's a concern that people will be perceived as being racist, right? This has been the mad thing. You don't report rape gangs of primarily Pakistani heritage in areas across Greater Manchester, around Birmingham, the Midlands and elsewhere, all around the country, lots of places, Telford, I mean, Leicester, like all sorts of places, because you don't want to be accused or be seen as being racist, right? So that's one of it. Partly there's a significant constituency in the Labour Party, in their attempt, when they lose the working class, which is what they've been doing, and they detach themselves from it, they've attached themselves to a kind of identity-based thing. And part of that has taken the form of appealing to certain communities, and they have a direct concern that if they say some of these things, they're going to lose those constituencies, as they've begun to do. I mean, Ayub Khan and Jeremy Corbyn and some others have set up a new party, right? Ayub Khan has been a big commentator on all of this, and you know, we've seen that. The vice president or the deputy leader of the Green Party is the guy who stood up and said Allahu Akbar and then apologised. But I don't know how that's green. But he's now and what is happening is that you got a situation where the Labour Party is worried about losing people to Zach and the Green Party, right? Who now maybe not so green, maybe they're a bit more radical Islamicist or whatever it is that they are. And those people who are going independent around Jeremy Corbyn, who are talking about issues but Gaza and other issues like that. And I just want to say this, right? Look, have whatever views you want on international relations. It's entirely reasonable. At Together, we don't talk about international relations, right? It's not what we're focused on. What we do talk about is freedom in Britain and privacy and rights and democracy. And I've seen that many of the people on some of the demos don't care about freedom and privacy and democracy. In fact, many of them have called for cancelling of others. And that's why it's so dangerous that the Home Office now has done this thing where if you don't feel safe, we're going to ban protest. And they've brought in measures, and I disagree with prescribing Palestine action. I think that, the actions they did at Bryce Norton, you could look at that. There are laws about dealing with that, and you might even say that that was a terrorist act, right, and deal with those individuals. And when they attack the police with sledgehammers, there's laws for that. But to prescribe a whole organisation as something, right, then what ends up happening is they become free speech martyrs. They go out with a placard, different people, and that's an issue, right? That isn't how I think it should be dealt with. And also, once you start prescribing all sorts of people because they know people or they're with people, or who's next? And like the Home Office is now saying they're going to stop protests or they're going to stop certain things, that becomes everyone. It will be the farmers next, it will be us next when we're talking about it. So it's important we discuss all these things out and we thrash them out. But the people I've seen on those demonstrations, many of them hate the West. I was at the thing yesterday out in Whitechapel, and that's been my knockabout area for a long time. I had a business there for 20 years in Brick Lane. My family's all from around there. I know it really, really well, right? I lived there for many years. I'm now in another borough in Hackney, but I went down there because for many reasons, right? I really think what the Pink Ladies are doing have been remarkable. They've inspired many people, but the Tower Hamlets are making them an extremist group, right? To try and banish them. See, this is it.
Because this is what we do. It's like when everyone tried to stop me from interviewing Tommy Robinson, and I questioned him, like, everyone calls you a racist. What? No one could actually pull up anything that they'd ever said racist. Very similar to the Katie Hopkins things. But what it does is when we use these big bold labels, it puts us in a box, because we then also by association. I don't want to make that it's a racist. Like, oh my God, I couldn't think of anything worse. And then you almost, by association, it silences people and distances other people from them.
Totally. And I think the thing is that much more, we saw a lot of that during lockdown where people called all sorts of names. And a lot of the time we kind of addressed that, we laughed it off and everything. And it's been a tried again. Listen, they tried to call the whole British public racist for wanting Brexit. The public still voted for Brexit. Like, some didn't, some did, right? Obviously, a lot of people came out to vote, the biggest thing that we've seen in the, for 100 years. The point about some of these things that are going on, right? The attack on British society. So the reason I said I went down to there, I went to Whitechapel, and there are people that are sort of protesting the fact that Pink Ladies are there, talking about their concerns about children and attacks, sexual attacks and crimes with people that shouldn't be at the hotels. Then other people come. Some of them have got Palestinian flags. Some of them are, and you're like, what's that actually really got to do with this? And they're chanting these things about this stuff. And then they're saying also racist scum off our streets. And I'm like, you haven't spoken to anyone. These are grannies and daughters and aunts and cousins, right?
They're dressed up in pink.
And they're like, when you're saying fascist scum off our streets, like you're trying, it's like become bizarre. And who are you talking to? And again, but it's a repetition. It's a theatrical.
It's a pantomime.
Yeah. And so I would really encourage everyone to have a think a bit more, engage some more with people we don't agree with, discuss it calmly. But the point I want to make about, but when you say you want to shut down, firstly, when you call for cancelling people, don't be surprised that you're going to get cancelled. And that's what's happened to Palestine Action. Right? But by the way, Palestine Action, they're calling for people to be boycotted and cancelled and not go to certain shops and all that, right? Hello, guess what? When you keep calling for those things, it's going to happen to you. I still don't agree with it, right? It's very difficult being a free speech absolutist because sometimes you're very unpopular with everyone.
Well, yeah.
But it's really essential we do that, right? Because you can only have free speech if everyone has it, which is different to actions. But also, many of those people I've seen hate what Britain stands for and the values and the culture. And that has been flattered by an elite, by our technocrats, by the people running it, who've encouraged that. And we're getting into a dangerous environment where, so words is violence, you've offended me, you're decadent and disgusting, people don't talk. And then what is it they're going to do? They go and do an act. Theatrical, bloody, violent, disgusting, terrible, and attack on us. And that's why I really think it's important that the more we can get our fellow friends, neighbours, colleagues out discussing, thrashing these things out and hold the line and say, that's not how we do it in Britain. We're not having that here. Right? You can say what you want, you could do, but no, there's a line, and the line is how we conduct ourselves, and we're not going to have that because we're not America, right? So we're not America. So where you get shot, where people say words is violence, but we have been banging people up for saying things, and we need to get it turned around and back on track.
I just feel like I could sit here for another whole day with you. But something entered my head as you were talking, just bringing it back to the digital ID stuff, because I'm cautious we have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So, if say you sign up to a digital ID card, you agree with it, you think it's for the greater good, the government can go straight into your bank account, or does it have access to already do that? Does it have access to the things we're already giving it access to?
Yeah, good question. Well, so Liz Kendall and the Department of Works and Pensions has already spearheaded the ability for the government to go into our bank accounts to check on what they're saying is pension fraud or benefits fraud. So now they're attempting to have this put through. They're moving with legislation to try and get that done. So, and the argument is that it's going to reduce fraud and crime. But actually, it's a Snoop's charter. It's an ability to go into banking. It's linked to the debanking thing. And we don't, absolutely unacceptable, right? The idea that civil servants and others can go into it. So they're trying to do that, of which digital ID will amplify and help them do it. And we should say absolutely not to that. And yeah, the government's got lots of information separately, right? And just remember, everyone, right? We've got CCTV cameras everywhere. At one point, more than anyone proportionally in the world, right? We still got a lot. We're in the top 5. But people are still getting mugged and raped and bashed up and stabbed, right? Now, you could say, well, some get caught afterwards. Well, yeah, maybe, but not that many. So the fact is, though, what happens is all the rest of us get treated like we're criminals all the time, constantly surveyed. And this is the argument for facial recognition. Well, if we catch one bad guy and we've got a few of them, then it's worth scanning 15,000, 20,000 people every day in the high street on the... No. Do the policing properly. It's like the same as that we say to the government. Do the housing. Do the economy. Is the
facial recognition happening like, you know, when you go to Tesco's and you do the self-checkout? Is that like a facial?
Well, what that is when you go in there at the moment, what that is... Because
your face, you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, is that it's recording you, right? Like, that's a video. So that the idea being... because they've got less and less people there, that if you steal things and all that, the idea is that that's something that you've got you on record for who you are. But that is connected, and there's questions, and this is a longer conversation, but some of the companies that are doing all of that stuff, like Palantir for the NHS and others. So, yeah, they do... But they record you at the moment. But obviously, we've also got loads of people going into shops just nicking everything. So obviously, that doesn't. And so the whole idea, even on its own terms, that those things prevent people from doing those things is a bit silly. And we've got to turn things around across the board in this country. We've got to do it with education. We've got to do it with our relationships to family. We've got to do it with the kind of ideas of what we consider to be values.
So I suppose that leads me on to my next question. So getting there, what does there look like for you in your activism? I
believe in the human ability to do things, right, and work them out. And I don't think that there is a end point. I think that we're in a process of trying to work out how to be the best things we can be or not, that we're in many ways flawed but phenomenal. People talk a lot about the flaws these days, but not about how phenomenal we are, from the Arc de Triomphe to the Mona Lisa to Beethoven to, you know, the Royal Albert Hall or whatever it might be. We have done amazing things, beautiful art, contemporary and classical. We make beautiful buildings. We generally engage one another. Phenomenal, beautiful. Just look at go down to the sea, go for a sea swim. There's so many amazing, remarkable things, but there are different ideas about how we should do things, and there's a bit of a battle going on, right? And I think that it's a huge battle, not a bit of a battle, right? I'm understating it. And it's important that the getting there for me is the journey, right? Really, in the end, I always used to think, if I get this, I'll do that. And if I get this, I'll do that. And I was thinking, all right, get that, boom, boom, boom. And those things are good to get, right? Whatever it is that you might be thinking, or if I get this bit of, qualification, or if I get this bit of do a business, or if I get a status. Now, obviously, look, everyone in therapy and all that in society, everyone talks about the ego, how much it's connected to it and all of that, with what your achievements are and everything. But I think that from a political point of view, the pursuit of what is really important for humans is essential. Now, we would have different agreements. People who believe in net zero say what's really important for humans is we save the planet and we're all killing it. And that would be their argument. Fine. Let's thrash that argument out. Let's kick the tires and see how much net zero really does to do that, or doesn't, or it's more like it's performative and it's not doing it. And let's see if we can win people over. The getting there right now, I think, particularly for us at Together, is getting more people involved and engaged as the public, have more people stand up and become leaders, have their say. That can be locally, regionally, or nationally. we've had an enormous impact on all sorts of things, like different groups forming and other people doing things in society, in politics, everything from elections to policy and other things, and on everything, right? It's all been part of, there's many people involved in this that are doing it, and it's inspiring. But I'm also recognise that we could do and all be much more. And I think that so that's as a group, as together. On a personal level, getting there, the journey, I think examining and self-reflection and honesty and questioning are really important things, right? And to keep, because, you know, I'm probably quite a bit older than you, but when I was growing up, the whole thing is like, you know, it was quite violent. People were a bit like all that kind of thing. And you get put into a certain box. We were talking about boxes, and to try and really make ourselves and find ourselves in the world, but do it in a way that doesn't have to conform to what the things say these are the rigors, but that you recognise there are some things we should conform to that are duties or others, and to be able to work that out and to be able to give a lead to others as well and try and do those things and show it by what you're doing and we're all doing. I mean, that's the thing, I suppose.
So much to talk about. I feel like I could have sat here for a whole day.
Yeah,
I feel like we need to do part 2. So everyone can find you at togetherdeclaration.org.
Yes.
Did I learn that well?
That was great.
Well,
and
wasn't it?
at Together Dec on X.
Beautiful. And I'll put the link so everyone can fill in the form.